The first teaser for Netflix's Pride and Prejudice is officially here, and it's familiar. Maybe a little too familiar. We're seeing the muted earth tones, the lingering looks, and that kind of soft, natural sunlight that defined the 2005 version. But this is what's got me worried. Netflix is clearly betting that if they dress this up like the 2005 version, that they will strike gold. But trying to replicate that lightning in a bottle won't save this adaptation if it doesn't find its own soul. Today, we're breaking down why creating a 2005 2.0 might be Netflix's next mistake. Welcome back to Regency Rumors. I'm Kayla, and here on the channel, I talk about period dramas, history, and historical fiction. And today, we are trying to piece apart every little morsel from like a 10-second clip, and I am here for being this petty. I'm really bad at promoting the channel. If you've enjoyed the video, like this kind of content, I'd love a follow, a comment, a hype, whatever else YouTube-y thing you'd like to do. It really helps small channels like mine to grow. I feel like YouTube still doesn't entirely understand what the channel is about, but we will get there. Any bit of interaction ensures I'm able to keep creating and making consistent videos over here and honing in the type of historical fiction and history and period dramas that you would like to see over here on Regency Rumors. Thanks to everyone who continues to support this little channel. I love you guys so much. Period drama besties. Now let's get to some historical yapping. So watching the teaser for Netflix's Pride and Prejudice, what I notice right off the bat are the muted colors and the lingering looks outside and the quiet nature, the sounds of birds. This is a heavy emphasis on the natural world. It's obvious Netflix sees how much staying power the 2005 version has on their platform, and they want to follow that blueprint as closely as possible, right down to those earthy tones and muted costumes, and just kind of expand that same sort of vibe into I think it's a 6-part series to tell a longer story. But you can tell they're really wanting to capitalize on the success of the 2005 version. But while the 2005 Pride and Prejudice aesthetic worked on audiences, people go crazy for it on clips on TikTok and on Pinterest boards, leaning this hard into another adaptation feels like a bit of a dangerous game to me. All that does is invite direct comparisons, which feels unfair. I talked in my last video on this new adaptation about the pros and cons of bringing out a new Pride and Prejudice, especially from Netflix, who have been accused of big budgeting things, but lacking in originality or dumbing down content recently, or needing many of its shows to follow similar visual formats that can limit the uniqueness of individual shows. I do think as these media conglomerates get bigger and bigger, we're gonna see this problem of studios like Netflix wanting everything to have a signature Netflix look that audiences can recognize. And I do think that that could hurt their content going forward. So I'm hoping that this adaptation is going to feel like its own unique thing. If it leans too heavily into the aesthetics and the lighting and the music of the 2005 version, there could be complaints about ripping it off just so Netflix can have their own version. The 2005 music score has a massive identity. People recognize those first few piano notes instantly. Replicating that vibe with an underwhelming, non-distinct score could make it impossible for people to connect when the 2005 version already owns that headspace. I feel terrible saying this, but with the music alone, they're coming up against a mammoth task because unfortunately people will compare them even if this new adaptation is more concerned with other elements and trying to be different because it's a series and not trying to accomplish the same thing as a huge big budget film that would be in a theater. I do think Netflix is capable of hitting that mark, however. If you look at Bridgerton, like beyond the string covers of pop songs, the actual score is incredibly recognizable and it's really moving at times. It has a unique charm that adds to the show's identity. So I definitely think Netflix could do that with this new Pride and Prejudice. If they can achieve that same level of distinction, creating a sound that is uniquely theirs, then they'll be on the right track, even if it's not as epic as the 2005 version. I just feel like if they're gonna try and give us like a budget version of Dario Marianelli's 2005 score, it's gonna feel hollow. So I feel like they shouldn't even attempt it. Like, I just finished watching The Other Bennet Sister, and I will be doing a video on that soon. But what I loved about that is it was not trying to recreate The Wheel. So if you didn't know, The Other Bennet Sister is a continuation story of Mary Bennet, and the BBC series has done a 10-part miniseries on it. And when I tell you, this is the most charming, adorable miniseries that I've seen in a really long time. It's not perfect. Some of the costumes are a choice. However, I feel like what they really focused on was Mary as a character, casting the right people, and wanting it to be very story-focused in a way that so many young women and older women who have grown up on Pride and Prejudice can see themselves in a character like Mary and relate to her. And so all the rest of it, the music that I'm sure is, a bit lower budget than something like Netflix could do, the costuming that was ill-fitted at times, the slower paced storytelling, that all is secondary to the fact that the script is good and the acting is good, and they've put on something that's really heartfelt that I think audiences will feel connected to. And so because you see that they have done that here, and it's very apparent where their priorities lie, you're less bothered by the fact that the music isn't the most epic thing in the world. So to me, if Netflix really makes it apparent what aspects of this adaptation are most important to them and do that really well, then I feel like, yes, of course you should have some really good music to Pride and Prejudice. It's Pride and Prejudice. However, I feel like if the chemistry between Elizabeth and Darcy is good, if, the Bennets hit the right marks, and if we see a lot of the side characters that maybe were left out in the film because there wasn't enough time, I think people will forgive not having something as amazing as Dario Marianelli's score in a television show. It'll be more about seeing that story play out in a longer way, and in a way that maybe even respects and follows the book a lot more than that version did. With this Pride and Prejudice teaser, we need to talk about Emma Corrin's hair. I am so sorry, y'all. I try not to judge this kind of thing, but I gotta be honest, I'm concerned. You can tell it's a maybe ill-fitted or ill-styled wig, and I don't exactly know why they've gone in this direction for this version of Elizabeth Bennet. I loved what they did with Emma's look in Lady Chatterley's Lover. Those same type of buns that you'd see in the Regency era, but kind of simplified for a later era, really worked for that character. I really feel like they should have just gone with Emma's natural hair here, or like a straight-haired wig, and I'm not entirely sure why the costuming and hair department didn't go in that direction. Emma Corrin has got such a similar, classic look for period dramas in the way that, Kate Winslet or Keira Knightley or Carey Mulligan has, and you can see it all so well with Lady Chatterley's Lover. But I don't know, y'all, there is something that feels off about this curly wig for this Pride and Prejudice, and how heavy that the curls look right here. There were so many complaints when the behind the scenes photos first leaked about the wig looking off, and I kept telling myself that it would translate better on screen once the post-production magic was applied. Because if you think about it, most of those behind the scenes photos that are taken, I don't think that they are taken with the permission of the crew. It's normally somebody who's doing it in secret and then they're leaked. And I definitely felt that way about all those Wuthering Heights photos that came out. Now, put aside what you think about this new Wuthering Heights and the storytelling. But in terms of what it looks like on screen, it's gorgeous. The actors look amazing. There's some very cinematic shots that were taken of Margot Robbie on the moors in her wedding dress in the actual film. But the stuff we saw from the behind the scenes photos, it didn't look great, it didn't look like that was going to be going in a film. And then when you see it on screen, while it's not to my taste and a lot of people's taste, it looked like something that was meant to be in a film, right? So that's what I was expecting here with this look, where the behind the scenes photos are always going to look worse than what you see on screen. But this teaser trailer looks just as bad as those behind the scenes photos. Even in this tiny snippet, the style feels heavy and artificial, and the curls are doing too much. It's a shame because you can tell the production are trying so hard to lean into that kind of ethereal vibe with wanting to focus in on natural hair looks, but I don't know what was going on there, guys. Like, I don't know what this choice is. I was really hoping that this would feel more unique to a new adaptation. I was hoping that the makeup and the hair and the costuming, department would take a risk rather than playing it safe with the same, like, kind of linen heavy muted palette we've seen in the 2005 version and then in a couple of the older Austen adaptations. I think when you play it this safe, the visuals start to blend into the background instead of becoming a character in their own right, something that's distinct to this adaptation. My friend Charlotte brought that up. She thinks that the teaser trailer and some of the wording in the description for this video are trying to signal that we are not doing what Wuthering Heights are doing. We're playing it safe. We are attempting to appease a Janeite audience. Check out her video because she has some really interesting points around the way that this Netflix adaptation is being marketed compared to the new Wuthering Heights. The new Wuthering Heights, love it or hate it, has caused a stir. It was visually stunning, but it also felt visually chaotic. The messaging and things like color was so overt that I feel like the meaning got lost at times, or it was less impactful. People love to rewatch more prestige film and television to find subtle details that the director hid. But when everything is too on the nose and lacks a flush visual language, it starts to feel clunky, in my opinion. I know some people loved it and said it looked like a beautiful Pinterest board, and I get that, but to me, the limited dialogue and the visuals, taking such a precedence meant it felt like actors filming in multiple locations rather than characters living in a world that we think is real. If we compare that to Emma, which, by the way, wasn't really historically accurate at all. Some of the costumes push the boundaries with tie-dye, and the sets were, way too French Rococo for the Regency era. But because the director held fast to that specific style and also had a lot of historical accuracy in the colors and the patterns and the tailoring of the clothing, even with the modern infusions, it made the community of Highbury feel more real and lived into audiences to where they accepted this as a place that, a community and Emma and her father lived. We accepted the changes because the world was flush and consistent from shot to shot. And I think there was a lot more on-location filming than there was sound stages and sets. So I feel like that made a difference compared to Wuthering Heights as well. That, to me, is a perfect example of how an adaptation can be wrong historically, but right as a work of art because it stays in its lane and it knows exactly what it is. I don't think Pride and Prejudice should go all out on Regency fashion in a way that Emma does, to be honest with you. I personally don't think it's necessary for a Pride and Prejudice adaptation, where I do think it was very clever for Emma. I think some of the more extreme parts of Regency fashion that we might find a bit clownish or cartoonish today would be a bit outlandish to everyday audiences. Yeah. And I don't think every adaptation needs to lean that heavily into historical accuracy for a more general audience. I think some of the overly pointy shoes or the collars up to men's ears would be distracting for a long series, but it worked for a more humorous adaptation like Emma. However, they could be more experimental with this new Pride and Prejudice to give it its own style. We don't need a total historical recreation, but we did need something more distinct than the 2005 version, but for TV. I'm holding out hope for a happy middle ground, something like the 1995 Sense and Sensibility for costuming in this, maybe. It didn't have bold, bright colors or some of the representations of the intricate tailoring in the Spencers that Emma did, but it had some great patterns and billowy fabrics and diverse accessories that made it feel more layered and real as an adaptation. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe that will be the vibe they're going for this adaptation. But from the stills we've seen so far, I feel like it's going to be a lot of dresses in one color. Okay, can we talk about how annoyed I am that everyone is obsessing over a 5-second clip of Jack Lowden as Mr. Darcy? There are people online complaining that he's blonde or not conventionally attractive enough to where they think they have to look tall, dark, and handsome, and otherwise he's not going to look good enough for us, which honestly, Darcy's looks were never meant to be the main vibes of Pride and Prejudice. Worrying that a man isn't hot enough or has blonde hair feels incredibly shallow when we should be looking for the human performance. I don't need him to look like Regé-Jean Page or to smolder like Jonathan Bailey for him to be a great Darcy. I've done a whole video on the problem with pretty boys and period dramas and how it feels like there is this need to prioritize BookTok hotness for period dramas and creating manufactured yearning rather than letting the audience decide what they find appealing. And I feel like general attraction to a character like Mr. Darcy has always been about his personality first, which makes a lot of people fall for his looks as a byproduct. Hollywood needs to stop trying to pre-package BookTok edits for us around who we should find attractive. And I do think this adaptation is taking a risk by focusing more on character than, Darcy needing a particular 2025 heartthrob sheen. And I'm personally up for the risk, especially if they're not, planning on taking risks elsewhere. I would much rather this be about Jack Lowden and Emma Corrin's chemistry and his acting abilities over him needing to have dark hair. At the end of the day, we are splitting hairs over a tiny clip, and it's important to remember how incredibly difficult it is to actually create something and put it out there. It's easy for us to sit here and, film these think pieces, judging others' work without necessarily having the backbone to put our own out there to be scrutinized. I have massive respect for a writer like Dolly Alderton for taking this shot. I feel like she's got to know the pressure that she's under creating a brand new adaptation of this. In a culture that can be so obsessed with mindless consumption, it takes real bravery to take a risk and make a classic your own, knowing it could either soar or be torn apart. I'm actually on my own mission to focus more on my own writing lately, so I really value that creative courage. That said, we are absolutely, still allowed to judge and criticize and speculate. That is part of the fun, and they put these things out there for us to kind of see and talk about and create a dialogue online, whether we like it or we don't. And based on those lingering looks and the focus on the letters, I suspect this version is going to prioritize the internal struggle and Austen's biting social commentary over the fashion anyways. Dolly Alderton's Bread and Butter is exploring the complexities of womanhood and personal growth and the messy dynamics of relationships. To me, that feels much more Austen-coded than, getting the exact historically accurate clothing or hairstyles in a new adaptation. The most profound thing about Jane Austen is that her characters are timeless, I think. We don't know if she would have cared about historical accuracy in her adaptations. She's dead. But we do know her characters are still walking among us today. Finding the spirit of a Mrs. Bennet or a Mr. Collins in our modern world is infinitely more powerful than a perfect visual recreation. I am hoping that the writing carries the weight that the visuals might be missing if things like the costumes are a bit lackluster. The heart of the story is there, the rest is just window dressing. Are the shades of Pemberley to be thus polluted? Well, that is it for me, guys. What do you feel about this teaser trailer? Are you blown away? Are you also underwhelmed? Are you hopeful? I'm honestly surprised I've been able to yap this long about something less than, I think it's less than a minute long, but I did not get a PhD for nothing. I did see where the new Sense and Sensibility that's supposed to be coming out in September has officially been delayed, so I do wonder what's going on there. They're filming right now, I believe, so I wish that I had the tea on what the delay is. But with this coming out in the fall and a new Sense and Sensibility, your girl is gonna be busy in the autumn anyways, so a little delay wouldn't be bad for some of us. But if I'm honest with myself, there's kind of nothing I would rather be doing with my time than watching these and talking about them here on the channel. And those of you who think I'm lame for spending so much of my time thinking about period dramas and historical fiction, don't you judge me. Don't you dare judge me. Okay, bye.